Hi everyone, welcome to the Armory and welcome to this week's Weapon of the Week, polearms and staff weapons. So I've got a few examples to show you. Let's start with the basic idea. A polearm, a staff weapon. The notion that with a weapon made out of a sturdy material like wood that I can easily shape, something as tall as me, or taller in some instances, I can both increase my reach and also have the flexibility to grab hold of the middle of this weapon and use both ends of it against you. So some sort of staff weapon existed all over the world in every culture, and they're basically used in the same way. They would be from materials like yew or oak, or in the East, bamboo, that would be both sturdy and flexible. I could use an entire tree or a part of a tree. I could shape it, hone it, make sure it was smooth enough for me to use. And really, any person could own a quarterstaff and train in it. In England, in the Middle Ages, they would have competitions in quarterstaff fighting because quarterstaff fighting was helpful in terms of all sorts of fighting, and so it was encouraged all over the country. So the tales of Robin Hood have a lot of stories of quarterstaff competitions in them. So there's the basic idea, a staff, length and flexibility. If we take the earliest thing that probably got added to the end of that staff, any kind of sharp and pointy implement, we get the oldest of staff weapons, the spear. The idea that if I take my sharpened flint or my sharpened blade and I lash it to the end of my staff, what I have is the increased reach to reach you and stab you and not endanger myself, and also I have that same flexibility to use both ends of it. This is a leaf-shaped blade that has both edges and a point, so I could clearly use it for slashes and cuts, and the increased length meant increased angular momentum. A cut from a weapon this long would have a lot more momentum behind it than a cut from a sword would be, so in many cases, superior in cutting power to the sword itself. We see the spear all the way back to prehistoric times, through the classical era and beyond in the form of the lance and the javelin. And through the classical era, we also see variations on the spear, like this lovely trident. Now, this is a training trident. The idea here would be those three prongs would be sharp and barbed. The trident's usually associated with Poseidon, god of the sea. That's because it was originally a fishing implement. If I have one spear point with a barb, a fish might wriggle off that if it's big enough. 3 spear points with a barb, not so easy to get off of. But the Romans adapted this for the arena and created a gladiatorial character that would fight with a trident and a net, got that nautical theme going on, and the trident was very useful for catching oncoming blades and trapping them, or for stabbing at distances, or for slashing, and in accompaniment with the net, I could use it to help me manipulate the net and throw it over my opponent and trip them up. So there's a lot of flexibility in the trident as well, and you can see that exemplified in films like Spartacus and Gladiator, and also in the television show Spartacus as well. As we shift into the Middle Ages, we get to one of my favorites. It's the poleaxe. This is a really big one. It's very simple in its design. On one side, a big axe. On the other side, a heavy hammer. Once again, this one, tall or taller than me. So that's a lot of momentum and a lot of mass behind these cuts, and I still have the other end that I could be using. So I could be reaching up onto a horse, hooking a knight and pulling him down, and then using the hammer to bang on his joints or armor, really do some serious damage. Poleaxes were also used in the lists by knights. They were one of the training implements of knights, and so when knights would meet in the lists, meet for competition to train and both see who was best, they would use poleaxes against each other as a form of weapon in armor. And one of my favorite poleaxes that I have here is the halberd-style poleaxe. So this also gives you the idea to get a sense of what a halberd would be like. A halberd in its original form was a much taller polearm that would be used by guards and soldiers and had multiple implements on it. Here's a dagger-shaped blade, a hook-shaped spear that allows me to grab hold of a person on horseback or on foot and pull them, and then a point on either end to this really beautifully curved axe. This one's on the shorter side, so it can be used in the lists, and I can grab hold of it like the quarterstaff and use both ends, and you might notice that at this other end, there's an iron cap. So in both instances, being hit with this has the momentum of the staff weapon and the advantage of steel to really do some serious damage. and this was a major form of competition and contest in the lists for medieval knights. After the Middle Ages, the polearms sort of falls by the wayside. Firearms kind of make it obsolete, though we're still seeing things like lances and cavalry into the late 18th and early 19th century. But the major polearms are classical, pre-classical, and Middle Ages. So, that's today's unit on Weapon of the Week. See you next time. Hey guys, bonus content. I forgot one, and it's right here. You probably were looking at it the whole time. This is one of the coolest polearms I have, and it's called a bardiche. It's a weapon that actually had lots of metamorphoses throughout the Middle Ages, but this one is based on a 1400s era weapon that was used in Eastern Europe by the Russians. They think descended from the Danish axe. The idea here is I've really amplified the axe. I've fixed it in two places to the staff that I've got, and I've sharpened the end point. I've also really shortened the staff, so the idea is not so much that I'm going to take this big axe in battle and swing it over my head, but that I'm going to grab it at relatively close quarters and use both the chopping action of that axe and the stabbing action of this spear against my opponent. Also, in Russia in the 1400s, there were a troop of soldiers who carried both the bardiche and a long rifle. Now I'm going to use this staff to represent the long rifle. The idea was they not only used the bardiche for hand-to-hand combat, they used the bardiche to steady their rifle when aiming. Weapons of the time, rifles of the time, guns in general of the time were very heavy in their construction, and so to aim them was rather difficult standing. But what I could do is rest it on that flat part of my bardiche and then aim it from where I stood. So it would be this height or maybe a little taller. I might be down on one knee doing this, but it made it easier for me to fire my rifle. And then once I'd fired it, I had this convenient little bardiche to do the rest of my fighting with in case I didn't have time to reload. So that's the bonus content, the staff weapon known as the bardiche. Okay, see you next time.